Alex Robles here to talk about a specific change initiative for this first self-portrait. The biggest change initiative I can think of was when there's new management at one of the companies I've worked at. I imagine this is a fairly relatable experience for many people. For me, this is the first time such a change had occurred. I'll begin by explaining the situation and then explaining it further through the lens of selective perception and the sunk cost trap. The change initiative involved an extensive overhaul of the company structure by the new management. This occurred when a new head of the division was hired at my company. While in action, there's quite a bit of tasks changed. Essentially, the company is looking to streamline many of the tasks for the company for individuals in my role. The change physically took place at my office, and I presume in other offices around the country as well, through a specific in-person meeting to discuss the change. My current manager and new manager were in the meeting, with the new manager being conferenced in there on the East Coast. They did later on end up coming to the office to discuss the change as well. This took place years ago and during the regular working hours, kind of on a normal day. My specific role was really just to adhere to the new guidelines and carry out the new initiative to the best of my abilities. I didn't necessarily have to enforce the new guidelines on other people or any of my subordinates, as I did not have any at the time. Now, let's get into more of what exactly changed for the company and for myself. So there are specific procedures put in place that were meant to have each branch of the division perform tasks the same way. This is done for employees of my level and below the company. The change initiative was important for the company to generally make a portion of the company run more smoothly and on the same page. And I can see it also potentially being related to some cost-cutting measures down the road, as you can essentially have somebody working for someone in another state and adhere to the sort of wages of that state. And since the processes are the same, you don't necessarily have to be in the same office as that employee you're working with. So I'd say it's also important from an oversight perspective. The company's able to assess the employees' performance more effectively as they are now all doing the same work. Before, there were different expectations at the different branches, for instance. And the largest and most impactful change for myself was that this group of employees was now reporting to a single new manager for all of the employees for which this change applied. Previously, these employees and myself reported to the manager of their branch. So for me, this is a huge change. So I can safely say that during this time of change in my life, I was not thinking about it in regards to any type of perception bias or trap, but now it is illuminating to look at the situation through the lens of selective perception and the sunk cost trap. So thinking about selective perception, I find it hard for anyone to not be afflicted by this bias in one way or the other. And of course, I looked at this situation through my own personal experiences. So being at the company, I was trained and expected to perform my duty a certain way for so long, and I was hired under the impression that my manager is going to be my manager, for instance. As I, at the time, was thinking of the situation through my own interests, background experience, and attitude, I perhaps did not look at this the appropriate way at the time. Generally, it was initially not easy for me to accept that I was now to report to someone else, and my work performance was now being assessed by this new individual. I saw the situation more as that the change was made on paper, but in reality, everything was still business as usual. I acted according to my own interpretation of the situation rather than how it really was. This is all very indicative of selective perception. And per lecture, selective perception is a form of bias because we interpret information in a way that is concurrent with our existing values and beliefs. So looking at that definition of the bias does not necessarily sound like a negative thing to do, but the way I approached it was perhaps a bit more negative than I would have liked it to be. So this is really intertwined with the concept of the sunk cost trap, which is very applicable to my situation and per lecture happens a lot, especially in the changing management process, which is essentially what happened to me. My situation, I was certainly part of the old regime that put a lot of investment into the existing processes. It seemed counterintuitive to just mostly disregard all the work I'd put into the old way of doing things. So there was an escalation of my commitment to the past practices by not instantly and substantially committing to the new ones. In reality, without adhering to the new processes, I was just delaying the inevitable and holding on to my pride as an ego defense mechanism. Tying it back to the lecture. I thought I was above such a change, considering I had put so much into the old way. In hindsight, I likely would have acted differently if there was more explanation, perhaps, as to why the change occurred. So the Harvard Business Review article, "The Hidden Traps in Decision Making," does have a useful tip in dealing with the sunk cost trap, and their advice is to seek out and listen carefully to the views of people who are uninvolved with early decisions and who are hence unlikely committed to them. I think this way of thinking and decision making could have been very useful for me. I really didn't discuss my thoughts of the matter with anyone, and it could have been useful to voice my concerns and receive feedback from people more impartial to the situation. So my decision making in the beginning of this episode was perhaps burdened by what the Harvard Business School articles alludes to as perhaps a wounded self-esteem, as I did in a way feel a source of pride in the old way of doing things, and it was hard to let the past go in that sense. So my experience with the sunk cost trap here was that my refusal to change was just digging myself deeper in the hole of that. But in the words of the wise Warren Buffett, when you find yourself in a hole, the best thing you can do is stop digging. So when I'm looking back and thinking about how my decision-making style impacted the choices I made, I can say that while it may have held me back initially, it ended up working out well for myself and the organization in the end. Despite my internal grumblings about the situation, I eventually was all aboard the change train, so to speak. I eventually ended up having a great relationship with my manager. This new system, we were able to do some excellent work together. I eventually was moved into a role under my old manager, so that worked out as well in the end. I'd say the change initiative shaped me for the better in the end, so I feel more apt to adapt to change and look at the bigger picture if I was in this situation again.